Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Thursday. Well, saying that, I'm recording on Thursday. You're watching it on Friday because it is my show with team news and ticks. How you getting on, mate? You all good?
Yeah, I'm all good. By the time this comes out, I'll be on a plane to Germany. So yeah,
Very
all
nice. The
good.
Euros start here, mate. You excited?
Yeah, I mean, I hate this period of especially when there's a tournament of the time before a tournament because there's never really anything goes on transfer wise. There's obviously no actual football to enjoy. So I can't wait for football to happen. Like
Yeah.
I don't mind in a normal summer when even last summer I went away for the whole summer, but the transfer stuff started early and there was teams were actually looking to do business early, but with the Euros going on, teams just there's not been a significant transfer really.
No, it's been really quiet, isn't it? Yeah, I love these summers. It was back-to-back tournaments as well. We've got the Euros, Copa America all going on at the same time, and it's just, yeah, I just can't wait for those days, like 3, 4 games a day. It's yeah, it's going to be very nice. So just to flag again, we are pre-recording this, guys, which is what I said at the beginning. We're doing this at 1:07 on Thursday. We are recording this right now, but it's going to go out on Friday. So as usual, if anything big happens sort of Thursday evening before Friday and we haven't spoken about it on this show, it's because it is pre-recorded. So just to flag that. And also, of course, as usual, if you know the format of the show now, we do the first half here on my YouTube channel and then the second half goes out on Team News, Ticks and Patreon. And the link is down below to click on that and head over to there, sign up and get the second part of the show and plenty of other exclusive Arsenal and football news. Right. So, got loads of questions. I don't know about you, but got loads of questions. So, we may as well just go straight bang into it. As you can imagine, lots and lots are all focused on transfers right now. I've just realised I haven't actually got the slides ready. So, I'm having to do it on the go while I'm talking to you. But it's all the talk's been about Sesko and Arsenal missing out on him and where they're going to sort of transition to now in terms of the attack. I'm sure you've had loads of those type of questions as well, but we've got plenty of them. And I think we'll sort of kick off with those. First of all, actually, before we get on to it, I mean, what are your thoughts about the sort of the Sesko news? Obviously, it'll come as a bit of disappointment to Arsenal that he is staying. I'm not massively surprised. Are you?
No, not really. The biggest surprise for me is that I know, and because we said it, I don't know what it was a couple of weeks ago, that the plan they'd outlined for him was that essentially you will be second choice striker, and that you're going to have to earn your place. You're not going to come in as the nine, essentially. And then obviously John reported that Arsenal had been told by his agent, and I have no reason to doubt John that okay, that was the route they were willing to go down. They were happy to accept that. At his age, I wouldn't accept that. I'd go and want another year playing for Leipzig, which is essentially what he's opted for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think just the miscommunication or his agent essentially lying to us is the bigger shock of it, because if he would have said, look, I like your proposal, I'd like to play for the club, but at this time in my career it's not for me, I don't think there would have been I don't think any of this would have been drawn out. But then maybe that's what his agent wanted, and we don't know what his wages are like, so that might have got him an extra 20-30 grand a week, in which case you lie through your back teeth.
Maybe. I think maybe I think it was more the fact that it had been communicated that if he decided to leave Leipzig, Arsenal were the club he was going to head to. I'm not sure what John said was entirely like he said yes to Arsenal and that's it. I think it was more that over the other clubs, and that's what the other clubs felt as well, and felt that like they'd been told as well that he probably was going to end up at Arsenal if he did go. I do think it's the right move for him, to be honest. I really do. Like you said, I mean, he wasn't going to come in and be the starting number 9. Kai's got that shirt right now, and I don't think Sesko signing would have meant that Kai lost that shirt. So he was going to have to sit on the bench a bit and bide his time and adjust to a new club, a new country. And when you're, 21 years old, just turned 21, you've only just kind of got yourself as a regular in the Leipzig side. I'm not sure that's the best for him and his development. So I'm not overly surprised, I have to say, that he's made that decision. I think it's a pretty sensible decision. But yeah, definitely a blow to Arsenal. I mean, we've got quite plenty of questions on him. We've got loads of them. So we'll just crack straight into it. We've got one from Sam. It says, hi, Charles and TNNT. Now it appears the Sesko deal is off. It seems like we're more likely to go for a wide forward rather than the traditional number 9. If the club were to revert back to the number 9, who would you both go for? Cheers. Come on, you Gunners. I was reading this and it got me thinking that I'm not surprised that Arsenal if Arsenal do now move away from the idea of signing a number 9, I'm not overly surprised, because I was sitting here thinking, who would I go for now as the traditional number 9 instead of Sesko? And there's just not. I don't think there's that many real sort of appealing options, and the club will probably think that as well, I imagine, when they're looking at where else to go for. There's no one who really springs into my mind. Obviously, like I've said it before, Isak's my dream signing, but I don't really see him as a traditional number 9. And you sort of look at the 9s that are out there. I just, there's no one that really, really totally floats my boat. I don't know about you.
No, I mean, just to answer the question slightly differently before I come to that, I don't think we will sign a 9, and I'd always said that when I was given our list of targets back at sort of start of the year, that the only guy there that could really play 9 was Isak, and that was seen as very unlikely, and also noted that he could play wide and he could still play with Kai.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was very surprised with the Sesko news. I think I've said it on here, I've definitely said it on Patreon before, that I had recorded something saying that we wasn't as deeply interested, as far as I knew, in Sesko as being reported. And then just prior to release it, that had actually been scheduled but hadn't been released yet. I got a message from one of my contacts at Arsenal saying, oh no, it's actually like we are going for it. And obviously we spoke to him, and then that was when I found out the terms about him not being the first choice 9 and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It was seen as a market opportunity. And I hate the term, I really do, because people make it mean whatever they want, but they saw his value as much higher than what his release clause was, and also the room for improvement with him being so young. It was a chance that they felt they had to try and take, and that doesn't mean they won't go back from him in the future, obviously price dependent, but I think it was very situational. So I don't really think we will go for another 9. I think the answer people want to hear to this question when they say, oh, what 9 are we going after now, is Osherman. But we spoke about it before, I really, really can't see it, well, especially not at the release clause.
No, it doesn't. Osman, yeah, I'm not really on board with that, especially like you said, at release clause. Look, again, the whole market opportunities thing arises, and suddenly Napoli need to do a cut price deal to ensure that they can get Lukaku and a couple other players to sort of strengthen. Who's just gone there? Conte, isn't it? Yeah, Conte's just signed, isn't it? To sort of strengthen Conte's squad. Then maybe if you suddenly get a decent price by the release clause, it doesn't feel like one to me that Arsenal can do. So there's just no one who totally springs out to me as a number 9 target, I have to say. No, I mean, actually, have you got a question before I move on to another one?
Yeah, sort of on the striker thing, but it's with Sesko opting to stay, do you think there's any chance Arsenal could opt to add those significant striker funds to the midfield allocation, making a move for either Joao Neves or Bruno at release clause much more likely?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got some similar questions to that, and I think that's a really sort of likely scenario here. You think that money was put aside for Sesko, the fact that that's not being spent now, and if Arsenal decide that a new number 9 isn't essential, then that money can move into another pot, and that could help you with one of these types of signings. I mean, you've spoken about Neves before, haven't you? And we've both mentioned how high that release clause is, and that Benfica are adamant that they're not going to do any business, as far as I'm aware, unless that release clause is met. I didn't think Arsenal would go anywhere near meeting that release clause, but I suppose you could never rule it out now if they've got an extra bit of money in the budget that they had earmarked to be spent on one position, and now think, well, you know what, let's strengthen in another area instead and put that money on top of what we already had to really bring someone else in. So I think it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, and I'm not sure about this, but with how German release clauses work, so with Spain, you don't pay the release clause to the club, you pay it to the league, and they hold. With Germany, I'm not sure if so. With Spain, it has to be all paid up front because, as you said, going to league offices. With Germany, I'm not sure if we had earmarked roughly 55 million for him and it had to be paid up front. As I said, I don't know the terms, but assuming it's similar to Spain, that's actually a hefty chunk of money. And then the same will go for. With Joao Neves, again, we don't know the terms of the release clause. It could be spread over the length of a contract. It could be up front. We never know. But if we have, as I said, that earmarked money plus it was due to be paid up front, it actually gives us a hell of a lot of spending power.
Yeah, look, just wrong one there. Just talking about Joao Neves, I've got one here, and I know we've kind of spoken about this before, but just to answer Daniel's question, he said, do you have any idea how firm our interest in Joao Neves is? I know the release clause is very high, but it seems like one of the few Rice and Odegaard potential partners that could take us a step forward. I know you're well on top of the Joao Neves stuff, and you're, I think, the first person to even report the interest was there. So are you able to answer Daniel's questions there in terms of how firm the interest is?
So they were scouting him for a long time, sort of remotely, looking at the data and whatnot. And then I think it was February. Since February, they've been scouting him and sort of at every game, eye test. So I guess the way scouting tends to work is it has to be quite far down the line for them to send people to watch them, because they'll get all the background information they can first remotely. So they're serious. I mean, I can't say anything in terms of we're directly speaking to him, whatnot. I mean, I can't say that. I'm not saying it isn't happening, but if it is, I don't know about it, and I highly doubt it's happening. But in terms of the scouting and the watching of him, they've gone to the sort of highest level possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the release clause as well, going back to that last question, is that if you really want him and you do feel he is the guy to go for, but you were being put off by the amount of money you're going to have to spend, I suppose if you suddenly have a little bit of extra cash that you weren't expecting to have available to you, then the temptation could be, if you do think he is the one, to really sort of push the boat out and use that extra bit of cash to get it done. I mean, I really like him from what I've seen. I haven't seen loads of him, but of all the players that I've seen, the sort of young players that I've watched and I've seen Arsenal being linked to, I think he's the one that I look at and watch how he plays and just think, oh, he's got something pretty special about him. I'm always a bit suspect with it, especially coming from Portugal. We've seen Vieira firsthand sort of struggle to make that jump from being a talented young Portuguese kid playing in Portugal top flight to England. But I look at Neves and he's just got an awful lot about him. And for a player so young to be playing the way he is and to carry himself the way he is, he just looks like he's just a little bit. He's got that something special that you need to become a top player.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think there's a young player with that sort of price tag that I wouldn't be nervous about. And that doesn't reflect on the player at all. It's just like you're chucking that much money at a young player. Like, had we signed Endrick, who everyone thinks is going to be the potentially like Ballon d'Or winner one day, and obviously he's gone to Real Madrid for big money, I would still be nervous had we signed him. It doesn't mean I wouldn't want it, but I don't think there's any young player where I'd come in and think, oh yeah, that's just definitely going to work. Like with Rice, obviously we'd seen him in the Premier League and he was a bit older, he's had loads of experience. There was not a single doubt in my mind that transfer was going to work. I know some people did have doubts, but for me with Rice there wasn't one. Whereas I think when we're looking at these young players, he looks amazing. Neves, you can't argue that, but there would still be in the sort of what if would be in the back of my mind. But that's a chance a club, whether it be us or anyone else, are going to have to take. I mean, there was reports last week that United had offered, or they'd spoke about to Benfica about offering 60, and they got the same response as us, as well as everyone else's release clause or nothing. It'd be interesting to see if they, like, the clubs, is that what clubs are actually valuing at, around 60, and then the rest is the premium to get him early and beat off other clubs, essentially.
Yeah. It's a risk, isn't it, putting that sort of money down on a kid, like you said. I mean, you can't guarantee any transfer is going to be a success, let alone a teenager. But for that sort of money, there'd definitely be a lot of nerves there if someone did decide to splash that amount of money. I'd be surprised if someone triggers that release clause, I have to say. But he does look a hell of a talent.
Yeah, I think we said on here a couple of weeks ago, I think the interesting thing is if someone someone matches the release clause, or triggers it, if other clubs then go and do the same. I think that will be interesting, because as I said, we know that he's been watched by absolutely everyone pretty much, and maybe everyone feels he's not worth it at that and he might be cheaper next year, or they'll just have a year's more experience, a year's worth more to watch him and with more focus. But if everyone thinks it's the opportunity that we're hearing they think it is, if say we done it, would then Chelsea, Man United then go and match it and to potentially not miss out.
Yeah. Is he in the Portugal squad? I presume he is in the Portugal squad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he could have a breakout Euros as well. It could be like their menu, I suppose. And there's certainly be lots of people watching him, no doubt about that. Right, you got a question?
Yeah, it's slightly different. And I actually spoke to Simon Collins, one of the other journalists, the other day about this. because I feel slightly different about it. But the question is, as we've seen so far, Arsenal have kept targets and links really quiet. How does Arsenal generally achieve this, as agents and selling clubs love to talk?
How do Arsenal achieve it? God, that's an interesting one. I mean, Arsenal just are a pretty closed shop, I think, from having worked in and around them for a long, long time. I think it's certainly now. And I did actually have a question about this. I didn't include it because we had spoken about it before, and they were asking about sort of Arteta plugging the leaks, and is it harder now than it was back then? And it definitely, I definitely think it's harder now to get information from as many sources as you did back, certainly in the Emery era, but even really in the Wenger era. And I only joined the Arsenal pack sort of late on in the Wenger era, but in the Emery era, it was pretty easy because so many people were unhappy, and an unhappy camp, news just filters out of it left, right, and centre, because you got players who are annoyed, you got agents who are annoyed, and when you're annoyed, you want to, they're quite happy to let information get out because they're just not in the mood to keep things tight. When you've got a really well-oiled ship like Arsenal have now, it's much more of a closed shop, and everyone's on board and keeping things in-house. So I do think it's harder now when it comes to Arsenal. But what was the actual wording in the question again?
How do Arsenal achieve it, essentially, with selling clubs and agents loving to talk?
They definitely do. They definitely do tell, they do tell agents and stuff not to talk and to keep things under wrap. That happens absolutely 100%. But it just depends if the agents listen to it or not. And I think when agents know that clubs don't like it, if news leaks out, then they're going to be a lot more sensible when it comes to who they talk to and how much they talk to people. Arsenal.
Yeah, I know. In the Wenger days, they used to. I mean, I don't know if they still do, but they used to make everyone sign NDAs. They were broken left, right, and centre, and you could never prove who it came from. Like, that's why it was rare you would see an agent out and out come and do an interview saying, "This team is chasing me." If it was true, if they were lying, they would say it to try and drum up interest. But I don't know if they still do that.
You don't really get agents talking publicly over here. You get it a lot more abroad, like in Italy, and especially, they always go to the media and talk publicly. You don't really get that here. And I don't know if it's more because journalistic practice here is, I think stories with quotes from agents are always kind of frowned upon within the industry. They're just like, why are you putting the agent stuff in there? By all means, talk to them, get the information. But it's always, whenever you see a story with actual agents' quotes, it's like, why are you quoting the agent? You don't need to do that. You can just write it with the information that you've got, but you don't actually need to quote the agent. But so I always feel like it works a little bit differently in England, talking to agents and putting the words out publicly than it does abroad, especially in Italy, where it's left, right, and centre, they're talking to journalists on the record.
Yeah, I think I remember, like, when Sky Sports News was at its biggest. I remember because it used to be like that. You never heard from agents. You'd never even heard an agent's name. And then when Sky Sports News was at its biggest, you started getting agents going on there, and I think that was probably the start of it. I remember I'd never heard of Barry Silkman, and he was on Sky Sports News, whether he was making stuff up or telling the truth. He was on there. He seemed to have a slot every day, sort of during transfer time. But so I don't know if that slightly changed things. But the reason I bring up this question, and it's because I've seen it a lot with, especially after the Sesko stuff, people going, "Oh, no one has a clue what's coming out of Arsenal." Nothing's coming out of Arsenal. Sorry, no one has a clue what's going on. It's a really tight ship. I massively disagree with that. Everyone knew he was after Sesko. Had we signed Sesko, no one would be saying, "Oh, it's really quiet and no one knows what's going on." The only difference between it, the news still came out. It was just the eventuality was different. A lot of our targets, like the Joao Neves stuff that we were watching, was come out. Everyone knows we're interested in Bruno. Obviously, we have been before, so it's not. I'm not saying it's a difficult one. It's not an out there guess, but I feel like with people going, "Oh yeah, no one knows what's going on. It's a real closed ship." I just don't feel like that's true. I agree that nothing's happened, but if we're sitting here in 2 months and we've signed Bruno or Joao Neves, Nico Williams, who's a target we've been linked with, and Hato, I know he said he's staying, but that happens, and you'll go, "Oh, everything did come out." I think we're just massively at the moment, because nothing's happened, but it's June the 12th, 13th. Nothing. Like, I don't think we've done anything this time last year either.
No. I think still definitely come out. It's still very rare you get a Vieira signing, isn't it? That happens once in every couple of years, maybe. But things still definitely filter out 100%. But I think as a club, Arsenal is nowhere near as leaky as some at the moment.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's because how things are run. And like you said, they certainly do tell agents not to leak things. I remember when Matteo Guendouzi's agent put a video of him out signing at Colney like a day before they were actually due to make the announcement, and then the video came out from the agent. He put it out, and it went round, and that really caused issues. Arsenal were not happy with that, and it made it very clear that that's not how they operate things with that transfer. So yeah, they are pretty hot on it, certainly.
But then it's weird because they like say that David Raya is the prime example, and Timber, to be fair, because there was issues with the contract, whatever they were, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But Raya was training for 2 or 3 days before we announced him. He was at the game before, whoever it was, I can't remember who we played, but I think it might have been the Fulham game actually. No, it wasn't. Whatever game it was, he was at the game. He'd been training. He'd filmed his welcome video 2 days before we announced the signing, and it's like
that happens a lot, like loads.
Yeah, so it's like in one side they're worried about stuff getting out, and on the other hand they do things that just like well, you've basically told us now.
Yeah, the actual signing, I mean, that happens all the time. Yeah, it's signed and everyone knows he's signed, but it just waits and it just winds everyone up, doesn't it? You get it on social media, like why the delay? Why delay? It's ruined the hype and stuff like that. People always say, don't they? Because
yeah, I remember with Jesus, there was that video of him pitch side at the Emirates, like a closed Emirates, but someone had obviously filmed it from club level, and I think it was still another 2 weeks before it actually got announced. And you're like, we've seen him walking around in the shirt on the pitch. Like, I know legal practices have to be met.
There's lots that go into it. Or they have to marry up all the different sort of image rights and different sponsorship commercial partner things. And there's loads that go into the announcement that sometimes everything has to come together before the announcement can come out. But yeah, it does feel like, I don't know if it's just because we're in the sort of Arsenal sphere more, we focus on it more, but it does feel like when it comes to announcements anyway, Arsenal do drag theirs out longer than most clubs.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Timber and Rare said that I think it was publicly released in the end that there was contractual issues, like minor, obviously, and they obviously got sorted, but they had planned to announce them both earlier. I can't remember what the game was, but there was a squad they wanted Timber involved in, and they were rushing to get it done, and then they found the problem with the paperwork. Or it might have been flying to Germany. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was meant to go somewhere with us, and then it didn't all get sorted in time, and they end up being announced 3 days later.
Yeah, there are plenty of delays. Right, I'll go on here. So it's just about the striker hunt. This is from Scott. Says, and what you said today, this was me talking about Gyokores in my show this morning, and I said I only had 1 good season in Portugal. He also had 2 good seasons in the Championship at Coventry and gets better season after season. He's just coming into his prime, and if he's not too expensive, he's perfect for us. A cheaper alternative, though, that popped up today was Tammy Abraham for 26 million. How would you both feel about Tammy coming to Arsenal? Not for me, especially on the back of a big, long cruciate injury that he's only just come back from. So no, that would be a big no from me. They have been interested in the past, definitely have been interested in Tammy in the past, but I cannot see that interest popping up again this summer after that big injury. On Gyokores, look, I wouldn't be against Gyokores. I think he definitely looks very, very talented. He obviously had a brilliant season, and Scott's right to point out he had very good time in the Championship, and it's a good league, the Championship. But I'd still be a little bit concerned about the high release clause on him.
Yeah, I've never, and some very well respected and knowledgeable journalists have linked us with Gyokores, but I've never, from my side, heard his name mentioned at all. Mm-hmm. I can't see us paying the price. As you said, it's 1 good season in Portugal, which is a league that's not really trusted. And in the Championship, I know he had a good time, but I watched a bit of that Coventry side, and Hamer was the guy, like the main man. I know Gyokores got the goals. And look, Hamer's coming to the Premier League, and I think he will get a Premier League move again this summer because he's a good player, but he's not looking at a top 4, top 6. Mm-hmm. So when people bring up his Coventry form, they go, yeah, he done okay there. I'm like, but he was outshone by someone who has just come bottom of the Premier League, albeit was the best player in that team, and then said we'll probably get a move, but to around your sort of either one of your newly promoted teams or around, the 16th to 12th place teams, and we'll look at a Hamer. So I always struggle to use the Gyokores Championship form as anything to go by. Mm-hmm. In terms of Tammy, I'd not heard anyone link us with him this year. Obviously, injury being a big thing, but as you said, we were very interested in him before. He's actually was at Colney before. Can't remember what year it was, but we couldn't get players out, and then we just couldn't raise the funds. Would it have been the year he went Roma? I can't remember when it was, but as I said, he was at Colney and we just couldn't get it done. But yeah, that's one I can't see us revisiting.
No, especially on the back of that injury. It's just it's a no for me on that one.
Yeah, true.
You're up.
Yeah. Let me just find. Taking it on a bit of a different route, just for fun. Do you feel City could be set to drop off in the next few years? They've got Walker, Silva, and especially De Bruyne aging, if not going this summer. Pep, everyone seems to think he's got a year left. Yeah, so essentially with that in mind, can you see City dropping off?
I can see him dropping off if Pep goes, 100%. I'm not so sure about the players that you mentioned, because I just think if Pep stays, they'll just replace him, and Pep will do what he does, and they'll stay this force that they are. So I think he's the main thing. He's the thing that holds it all together. I think they'll still be a top side when Pep goes, but I don't see them being able to continue this level of dominance. I think he is a difference maker. He's the best in the business, and yeah, I think once he goes, there has to be an inevitable drop off. I'm not saying they're going to suddenly fall from first to sixth, but I think there'll definitely be a drop off when he goes. It's just I can't see any way that there won't be. So for the immediate, no, I don't really see them being a drop off. But if Pep goes at the end of this season, then I think there will be.
Yeah, I couldn't have answered it any better. I think the players are largely irrelevant. If he's there, they'll figure something out. I mean, we saw the first half of the season, De Bruyne was out and they were still there or thereabouts. He's got them playing system. Like people always say Walker, but Walker had a bad year. He's got disguised because City are really good. But I think Walker is heavily on the decline. Obviously, his pace is still there, his power is still there, but I think he's heavily on the decline. But it just gets masked in the City system and have the ball all the time. I actually wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be famous last words when he gets man of the match every game. But I wouldn't be surprised if Walker has a really bad Euros, because at England you're not going to get masked by the system as much. City are very much a system team, and people tend to use that as a negative, and I'm not. They're a very, very good system team, but that system is Pep Guardiola.
Yeah, absolutely. It's different, isn't it? It's 100% the difference, and I just cannot see there's any way that if he goes, they can continue at it. They'll still be very good. They'll get a top manager in. They'll spend big money, and they'll back him, and the squad will be great. But I just don't see they can continue to do what they're doing under Pep, because he's just a one-off, and he's just the best in the business, as I said. So yeah, hopefully he does go into the season.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Or maybe doesn't fancy bringing them back up from League Two once the charges are dished out, or the punishment for the charges is dished out, if of course they are found guilty, which they say they are not, just for a legal reason in there. Here's one here. He says, why do you guys think that Ivan Toney links have gone so quiet? He seems like a forgotten man now. I'll hand the floor over to you for that one.
They don't like him. They met him and didn't like him. Like, as I said, I get hammered on Twitter for something I didn't say. So I think it was in February, I put out that a week prior to that, I thought Toney was going to be an Arsenal player because I knew we'd met him. And then obviously I found out what happened from that meeting and that they didn't like him. So I said a week ago, I thought my guess would have been Toney would become an Arsenal player, and now I'm almost certain that won't happen. But now I just get loads of people going, well, you said we were signing Toney. And I was like, I never said that. And the only time I ever came close to saying that was when I said it won't happen. But yeah, essentially, I think they've been speaking behind the scenes to him and his agent. I know when he signed with Stella, his agency, which I think was in August last year, and they basically said, what do you want? And he obviously was banned at that time. So he said, get back playing, get back in the England squad, blah, 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 all the standard stuff. But he was like, I want to move to a big club and preferably Arsenal. He saw himself fitting in as the 9. He thought he would get tons of goals. He thought he would suit the system. And there's a lot of me that thinks he's possibly right. But yeah, they met him and they purely didn't like him. Obviously, his previous interviews where he's bad-mouthed, but he's done it all the time with Brentford. But there's a few previous things. His gambling history would have come into it. I mean, I've not officially been told that, but when you say you don't like someone, there's a lot of things that come into it. And with Toney, there's just stacks of evidence of a personality that you'd imagine Arteta didn't want around the squad.
He's very big on that. If he doesn't think a player fits the personality or the character that he wants in his squad, he won't go near it. He's very very big on that. So yeah, I mean, I thought at a time that Arsenal would certainly end up signing Ivan Toney. I think this time last year, I thought it would happen at some point, but yeah, it doesn't look like that's on the agenda now. Interesting to see where he does go, if anywhere, this summer. I do wonder if he might rock up at Spurs.
Yeah, that would be my not best bet, but it's one you can see making sense because I was just. But the links of him have gone completely quiet with anyone. He was sort of linked with everyone, and then the links with us got rubbished.
I think Brian Mbeumo is a better player than Ivan Toney. I think Mbeumo is so good. I rate him so highly. Mbeumo, he can play a couple of positions, and he's still young. I think he's a really, really interesting player. Mbeumo.
It was interesting with him because I'd watched him a few times. Well, I'd watched him quite a lot, and I was like, he's okay. I didn't think he was great. And I found out how young he was, and I was like, oh, okay. There's something to it. He permanently looks 30. Like, so then I found out his age, and then I was at I think it was Cameroon, Serbia. I was at one of the Cameroon games at the World Cup, and he was so good. And it's sort of one of them where like you're looking like, who's this number, whatever he was, 19, and you look, oh, there's some brain. Like, I've seen him play however many times live and 100 times on the TV, but he was so good. And since then, I've kind of kept more of an eye on him. And yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying it's a player I would want, but for us, but he is a good player. He's always linked with Liverpool. I mean, I can't see that, but he is always linked with them. But yeah, he is a good player.
Yeah, no, I think he is. I think he's very underrated as well. Lots of people, Toney gets all the headlines, but I think he's really talented. He's got a great touch as well, really good touch. His technique's excellent. It really is.
Yeah, to be fair to them, they work really well together. They played what in the olden days would have been sort of like in a 4-4-2, the little and big man. I know Mbeumo tends to play wider, but they play that partnership really well together.
Mm-hmm. Right, you're up.
Yeah. Do you expect the busier transfer deadline day this year for Arsenal and the rest of the Premier League compared to last year, which was pretty quiet, and obviously with tournaments pushing things back?
Maybe so, because of the tournament thing. I mean, the last couple of deadlines have been so bad, haven't they? Dreadful. Not that that's a bad thing, because deadline day is just so hyped up, and it really shouldn't be. And if you're doing your business scrambling around on deadline day, it kind of points to a pretty poorly run summer window, to be honest. Maybe it will be slightly busier because, like you said, the tournaments might push things back a little bit. But yeah, I mean, as I said, Arsenal don't want to be going into deadline day with any business to do. They want to be done and dusted by then. And most clubs, well, pretty much all clubs will be the same. It never happens, obviously, and people do end up scrambling around. But yeah, I don't think anyone wants to go into deadline day with business still to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I know Arteta's a big fan of having everyone in, especially if he needs players to fit into his system and our quite unique way of doing things. He wants them around that for as long as possible. I mean, I don't know. I've not looked at the data, but I'd imagine on average our signings under Arteta have happened earlier, especially the last couple of years. Like Rice was essentially back for the first week of pre-season that he could be back because he had an extra holiday because of the Conference League.
Yeah.
Timber wasn't much after. I think Havertz was technically signed before.
He was before the first one, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a few days before.
Yeah.
But with Rice, it was a lot of waiting for him to come back.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of deadline day signings under Arteta. Obviously, Thomas Partey was a big one. They had the Aubameyang stuff to Barcelona was deadline day, wasn't it? Sure, I'm probably missing some other ones. I'm sure there have been others.
Yeah, in terms of ins, I don't. There'll be a few outs. I think Rob Holding was technically deadline day. I think I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah, he was.
But yeah, ins. Yeah, there's Partey, which was them negotiating the whole time. But again, that was sort of COVID hit times. That's why I had to go more in the last couple of years where things are quite different. And I think
Tomiyasu, there you go. Tomiyasu was one.
Yeah.
Just looking at some of the other ones. David Luiz, yeah, I remember David Luiz. Oh, actually, Jorginho was a deadline day signing, wasn't he? Thinking about it, pretty sure that was deadline day. It might have been.
I thought it was earlier, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I could be wrong there. It's just on sort of top of my head, but I felt like that was very late on in the window, but maybe not. Right, you got one? Oh, was that one? That was your one,
That
then,
was
wasn't
my
it?
one, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Here's mine that I got lined up. This is interesting. I haven't actually heard this at all, where this has come from, but I thought it might be interesting debate anyway, which was Naif says, "Hi, Charles and TNT. I'm hearing that PSG might be looking at Martinelli. I mean, I haven't seen that anywhere. If a bid came in for over 100 million, would you sell?" What's your answer to that?
Well, just some context. Indy Kalia, however you say it, said that this morning, so that's where that comes from.
Okay.
And yeah, apparently his rumor, which I mean, let's not pretend we're giving it any credibility, but his story was that they'd offered 120 million and we'd rejected it. It's a difficult one because I think if you'd asked me this 12 months ago, you'd say no with the potential and whatnot. After the year he's just come off, and I'm sure he'll come back and be better, but I think I would be very, very tempted with 120 million if it was on the table right now.
I mean, that's very hard money to turn down, isn't it? 120 million.
Well, it was like the Gabriel stuff last summer when Saudi were reported to offer some obscene sum. And it wasn't so like, if anyone that said they'd take it, it wasn't a reflection on the player. It was just that is stupid money. And it's, as you said, it's just always going to be very difficult to turn that down.
Yeah.
It's different where Gabriel was coming off a good season, obviously went on to have a better one. Whereas with Martinelli coming off, let's be honest, a bad season, is that makes you even more likely to be like, well, how can we reject this money?
Yeah, I don't know if someone seriously offered that, and I would not. I don't expect someone to offer that money. I think it'd be very hard to turn down, and I could absolutely understand if Arsenal accepted it. I wouldn't want to sell Martinelli though. I have to say, and I know he didn't have a great season. I was talking about him today in my morning show, and I just think a lot of people are writing off Martinelli far too early on the back of one pretty disappointing season. I think there's so many mitigating circumstances behind that season. Yes, he didn't play well, and he'll fully accept he didn't play that well, and he's missed some chances you wouldn't expect him to miss. But that left-hand side compared to the right-hand side was so destabilised throughout the season. There was so many different cogs sort of filling in and playing in those positions. And if you're Martinelli, whereas the season before you're so used to Zinchenko and Xhaka, and that left-hand side was so solid like the right-hand side was, and then suddenly it's just every time you've got a different player playing behind you and a different system playing, and I think there's definitely reasons why his form dipped the way it did, and it would not surprise me at all if Martinelli absolutely bangs next season and goes back to the sort of form that we know that he can show. So I'd be really reluctant to sell him, really reluctant, and you'd have to replace him with a proper top quality player, someone better than Gabriel Martinelli to make me feel halfway decent about selling him. But I do admit that if someone actually seriously bid 100, 120 million, it would be incredibly difficult, I imagine, for Arsenal to say no to.
Yeah, I think, as I've said this before with that position, I think the way we set up, especially with Martinelli there, is a bit of a poison chalice, and it's a really, really hard role to play, and I don't think it really suits anyone. I know he played it in a different way, but the thing that sort of makes it look worse for Martinelli is, in theory, Trossard played the same position, completely different role, but the same position for the same team, and was scoring for fun, basically, which I don't think helps Martinelli. And don't get confused with what I'm saying. I don't want to sell Martinelli, but I think I'd have a very hard time saying no if that cash was shoved in your face.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Right, should we go do one more question each before we call time on this and move over to part two?
Yeah. So one I've got, and it's quite an interesting question. I've just read it, and it's got me thinking. So that the last two summers, our transfers have been sort of made big tactical adjustments with them. Obviously, Zinchenko and Jesus, more footballing team, and then more power with Dek and Kai, more high pace power. Do you think we kind of stick to the mold we have now, and the signings fit in within that, or do you see another tactical change coming?
I don't see a massive tactical change coming, and I hope we don't see one as well, I have to say. I think given what's going on this summer with the tournaments as well, and people are going to be coming back late, and I think preparations for the new season are going to be disrupted anyway because of that. Players arriving at different times. I just don't want to go into the season with a big sort of new tactical tweak to get used to. I think Arsenal had so much momentum at the end of last season and it adjusted completely to the way the team, and Arteta was wanting the team to play and how it was set up, that I just don't want them to have to get used to things over the first couple of months of the season. I think it's really important to start the season well and get some momentum early doors. So I don't want to see massive tactical changes, and I don't really see anyone coming in sort of leading to that. I have to say, I think we'll probably see Timber at left back. I know other people disagree with that, but I think we probably will see Timber at left back at the start of the season if he has a good summer and he proves his fitness, and then maybe a new midfielder if he arrives. But other than that, I don't really see wholesale changes for the start of the season. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's a weird one because I would agree with pretty much everything you said sitting here now, but I would imagine if I was sat here this time last summer, I would have said I don't want a tactical adjustment. Everything, it's our best season in ages. We played beautiful football. Yeah, we fell off at the end, but you can put that down to experience or injuries, or obviously Saliba being a big one. But so I'll probably say the same thing now as I would have said this time last year, that I would hope we'd play the same and new players slot into that. And I think that's what will happen, as you said, with players coming back late. I think the Euros final is July 14th, roughly that weekend, and the season is it the 14th of April? The season, August, sorry, that the season starts. So, or again, that kind of week. So, even if the players don't have a holiday, if we get players that get to the final, which I think England and France are the two favourites at the moment, which obviously gives us Dex, Saka, Ramsdale to a small extent, Saliba, that. They're basically, you'd imagine the club will give them 2 weeks off after. So they're essentially not really going to have a pre-season. So yeah, I agree that we probably won't see many changes, especially because of that. But you never know, we might get an easy home game, first game of the season, and they might try something new. It's essentially what they had last year. They got Forest at home and thought, we can try to put it into action here. Because if you look at we played the Community Shield against City and went with what we thought our established team would be, and then completely changed it for the Forest game because they thought it was a bit of an easier touch. So when the fixtures come out on the 18th, hopefully the 17th, I should get them. It may dictate we might change a couple of things.
I do think the Gabriel stuff contributed a little bit to that change. Well, it definitely contributed a bit to that change at the start of last season as well. Also, I think the way Arsenal finished the previous season contributed to Mikel changing things. He looked at what went wrong at the end of that season, why they fell away, and he sort of went with the whole sort of moved from the chaos to the control, which was a big word for him. The whole control going into last season. I don't think he will look at how Arsenal ended, recently and think we need to change things because they ended so well, so differently to what they had the previous season. I think that will convince him more. And you never know with Mikel because he's such a you just can't predict what he's going to do a lot of the time. He'll suddenly have these thoughts and go with it. But I think he'll see how Arsenal finished last season without momentum and just think we don't need to tweak too much because they didn't fall away. They didn't bottle it or whatever people said. We pushed all the way. We won 16 out of 18 or whatever it was. So I just think he'll be more leaning towards keeping things as was, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of playing devil's advocate because I actually think the change came in January after Dubai, and that's what he'll stick with. Obviously, saw more of Kai up front as a 9. We saw more of whoever the left back was to be sitting in the back three, and it being Ben inverting or Ben having more license to roam. Whereas prior to that, it had always been sort of Ben tucked in and mainly Zinchenko when was allowed to wander. So I actually think the change came in January. But it's interesting with the left back spot because he's essentially always used since he sort of decided Zinchenko wasn't where he's going to go. He went with Tomiyasu and Kirill, who are both very comfortable. You'd say they're more centre backs than left backs. And with Timber, I know he has played at centre back, but he's obviously good at the ball. He's good at breaking lines. So I don't know if that would mean a change to Ben being more tucked in again, or if they would have to have that intelligence across the pitch to take it in turns and realise that, okay, Ben's going, Timber holds, or vice versa. I think and it's good that neither of those have an international tournament, because if that is the way they want to go, they'll really have to develop that relationship. And it's quite a hard one to do because width-wise, they couldn't be further apart on the pitch. It's not like the two centre-backs who can look over their shoulder and have a chat. They're 60 yards apart in a stadium with 60,000 people screaming. It's a really hard relationship to get on. It's like when you look at an offside line, it's usually a fullback that's out because they're not in communication with the other fullback because it's so far away. So I think it'd be important to get them to get pre-season.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Actually, the whole Timber White dynamic and who's gonna go and who's gonna not, who's gonna tuck in, who isn't. Like you said, it worked so well with Ben doing it after the change, after Dubai, and you certainly look at Timber and don't think he's a. You think he's just the way what we've seen from him anyway, in the sort of small glimpses we've seen from him. Even when he came back for the under-21s at the end of last season, he was playing the inverted role. So does that suggest that Ben will go to the role we saw him before the change? Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's one to certainly look out for. All right, last question here before we move on to part 2. From Charles. It says, hi, Charles, and that question for Team News and Ticks. What do you guys think about signing Dusan Vlahovic? I really rate him and wouldn't mind us going for him. I read that Juve are interested in Joshua Zirkzee as a replacement for Vlahovic if he leaves. Vlahovic is a weird one because even, remember when this was like massive and it was Arsenal were going for him, his agent's not picking up the phone and refusing to answer the phone to Arsenal and all that stuff. It was just every day it was really, really sort of strong. And yet I was consistent. I never even went near it the whole time because the messages I was getting from people I was speaking to, Arsenal was consistently it's not anywhere near like what is being reported. He's not at the top of the agenda. We're not really going for him. And I was consistently being told that, to the point I just didn't know, contacts who I absolutely would normally totally believe. I was beginning to doubt myself because of how strong the reporting was in Italy about him. But I still, I stuck to what my contacts were telling me and I never went near it. And obviously he didn't end up signing. He went to Juve, which we all thought he was eventually going to do anyway when he did lose Fiorentina. But I'm always skeptical when it comes to Vlahovic and any sort of Arsenal links now because of that time when it was just coming out so strongly that we were in for him. But I was just being told we weren't.
Was it the January we lost to Aubameyang? I think it was that when the time was the most. So I think there was a bit of a marriage of convenience there. Yeah, I never heard much on it. Look, that's not to say we didn't make contact, but
I think there was definitely interest there. But it was just, it was being reported so much that we were bidding. We made like 3 or 4 bids, and that his agent wasn't picking up the phone. I was just constantly being told it's Fiorentina are using us to get Juve to come in and bid the sort of money that they were hoping to get for him. And I was consistently being told that.
Yeah, again, it's very, very similar. As I said, there was interest, but it was never what we was told it was. And instead, especially with Arteta, it seems to be a thing that he always goes back for his targets. And I think that's where a lot of the links come from. They're like, oh, you targeted him before. We think like, well, you strongly wanted him before is what the public opinion is. And now he's potentially available again. And Arteta never lets a target go. But yeah, I can't see it. And I think even then, if he was coming at a time, it was a different time to what it is now. And what our needs were 2 years ago are not what our needs are now. And again, it's not just about positions, it's about profiles. So there's many different forms of a number 9. And what we needed then was essentially someone to kick the ball in the goal. Whereas now, and I know I've seen it all the time on Twitter, actually, people going, oh, we need a 35 goal a season, man. It's like we've just scored. Was it our most goals we've ever scored in the Premier League season? Just because they've not come from one guy, that doesn't. And there's an argument that if you've got someone who scores all them goals, you're purely looking to feed them, and everyone else suffers because of it. And I also think if you like put Kai's ratio from when he was at 9, if you spread that across the season, if you can keep up that form, yeah, he's never going to be a 35 goal a season striker, but you'll be looking at sort of 25-ish, which is more than acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. No, I agree. I can't see Vlahovic happening now. Like I said, I think we've certainly moved on from a club who were looking at him at a time, but I don't see it now. I've certainly not heard anything to suggest it. I think Zirkzee, who is a player Arsenal are interested in, although I think it sounds like Milan for him if he does go anywhere. Although I think they've just got Thiago Motta, haven't they? Juventus, who was Zirkzee's manager at Bologna, wasn't he? So maybe that does stir them into action. Right. Anyway, let's call time on part 1 of the show. Thank you everyone on my channel for watching and for listening. Of course, we are now heading over to Team News and Ticks' Patreon to continue on part 2. So if you want to follow and listen and watch listen to part 2, then the link to the Patreon is down below. Just go sign up to that and you'll be able to hear part 2. Until then, I'll be back tomorrow with my usual morning show. Have a great evening, everyone. I'll speak to you very, very soon. Goodbye.